Hi, I'm Susan Marinack. I'm the chair of the Leverett Historical Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest installment of the Historical Commission's project of inventorying Leverett's industrial history through sharing our research in a program form. And it began on the Sawmill River in 2019. Thanks to support from Leverett's Community Preservation Act Fund, during the past 2 years, we've visited 6 mill sites remaining in Leverett's historic landscape. We started out with an on-site program on Roaring Brook in East Leverett and the Sawmill River just south of the mill that we're focusing on tonight. Some have been challenging to recreate from the scant remains, sometimes because they were seasonal mills that only ran for a short time in the spring when the melting snow created streams to fill their mill ponds. Some because they employed quite elaborate technologies, but always requiring imagination to envision the missing buildings. We've been able to continue during the pandemic on Zoom, thanks to Eva Gibovic's gorgeous videos and Pleun's willingness to hike in every kind of weather. In the case of the Revolutionary War Captain Joseph Slarrow Sawmill, one of our oldest, dating to before America became an independent nation, the mill building with much of the equipment used in its operation is still standing on the original site. More of that in a moment, but I would like to acknowledge that though it has survived into its 3rd century, its future is not secure. The family of Hugh and Lloyd Curley, who restored it in the 1970s, and again with the town's help in the early 2000s, has offered to donate it, plus the adjacent 2 acres, to the town of Leverett. An ad hoc committee of volunteer citizens was appointed by the select board in the summer of 2021 to look into the pros and cons of the town accepting this offer. They are researching possibilities as we gather tonight. I will now turn you over to 3 knowledgeable historians, Pleun Bouricus, Dennis Picard, and Eva Gibovic, who can introduce themselves and Captain Slarrow's mill.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Sense of Where You Are, conversations about Leverett's historic industrial landscape and community. Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the Community Preservation Committee. Today, I would like to also thank the Curley family for making this program possible. They have given us free access to the mill and will be giving us free access tomorrow. Today is the first of 2 events. We're going to be telling you a lot about the mill. We're going to be talking about it, and tomorrow there's an opportunity to go and visit. A big thank you to Eva Gibovic, whose vast stock of knowledge of Leverett history, experience with mapping and videography, and hours of research are foundational as well as indispensable to this project. Finding and interpreting mill sites is kind of an iffy proposition. Not finding them because we have maps and we have people like Eva who walk through the woods. But interpreting them is often done of necessity with a wet finger and a lot of research. And by wet finger, I mean wetting your finger and holding it up into the wind to see which way the information is coming. And our big question is always, how do these foundations belong to the future? What do we want with this landscape that we have here in Leverett? Today is going to be a little bit different. As Susan already alluded to, today's mill is standing in the landscape and its future is hanging in the balance. And so we're going to do things a little bit differently from the way we have been doing them as well. We're going to start with a little bit of history, just enough so we have a sense of what this mill is. Then we're going to look at a video of the mill created by Eva Gibovic. And after that is when we usually start teasing out how it might have worked, what might have been there. Today, however, we have the honor of having with us Dennis Picard to walk us through the mill and tell us what he sees there. Dennis has been a museum professional for 40 years and an authority on work. He's an authority on work, old trades, tools, and machinery. He began his career at Old Sturbridge Village in Sturbridge, Massachusetts in 1978, where he, among other things, was a member of the crew building its mill, based on the drawings of a mill in New Hampshire that had been swept away by a flood. After a distinguished career, he retired as director of Storeton Village Museum in West Springfield, Massachusetts. Since then, Dennis has continued to learn and explore and has served as a consultant for historical societies, museums, films, novels, and so forth. Currently, Dennis serves as the president of the Pioneer Valley History Network. Dennis, take a bow. I don't know if you all can see him, but you'll see him later. So Dennis is going to make some fairly brief observations on the mill today, and tomorrow he's going to lead our field trip to the mill itself. So that's what we have prepared. The research has not been exhaustive. There's much more to be done because here we have a mill that was more or less active for the past 250 years or so. But we're also cognizant of the fact that there are people in Leverett who know a lot more about this mill than we do, either from having worked there, from having restored it, or for other reasons. And we would love to hear from them. So we invite any of them who are present today or tomorrow to step forward and tell us what they would like to share. And they can do so after Dennis's remarks today and tomorrow, of course, during our visits. After that, I hope we will have ample opportunities for questions and conversation. And then also, while I'm talking, I invite people to pipe up. I'm an outsider. I'm coming into Leverett from the outside. My job is to work the research into a comprehensible whole, and I can very readily get it wrong. And so if I'm wrong, tell me. And if I don't know something that is able to be known, tell me. And we were recording this, so we will have a record of it for the future. So for those of you who are not from Leverett, and some of you aren't, I just want to show you where this mill is. And I'm just need to move some stuff around here. I have too much stuff on my screen. So the Slarrow Mill is in the North Leverett Historic District on North Leverett Road. And then this is here is North Leverett Road. Here is Cave Hill Road. Here is a road called Chestnut Hill Road. And if you go this way, you go to Montague. And the mill sits below the road by a pond, now unfortunately empty. And now I'm trying to get my slide to move. It is a beautiful sight to see the Slarrow Mill to the side and below the North Leverett Road. It is privately owned by the Curleys, and we ask that you do not go visit without permission or on your own, even though it's open, though you should feel free to have a look at it from the road. The Leverett Historical Commission is grateful to Lance Curley for permission to explore the site. The Historical Commission also requests that those all who visit the site refrain from removing any items or making any changes in the mill. When I was last there, and we will see this tomorrow, I saw some graffiti that suggested very strongly that teenage young men had visited. And of course they would, right? But mills are dangerous places. It's easy to fall, easy to break a leg or your neck. Best to do that in your own yard, really. More than that, this site is a palimpsest. Does anyone here who knows what a palimpsest is want to explain it? A palimpsest is a document in which layers of information are written across each other and form separate layers of information. And here too, layers of history have been written on top of each other. Today's layers have partially, but not completely erased the previous. And whereas I hope it will become a historic site and be cleaned up, that should be done by those who can translate the layers back into their timeline and interpret them. People like Dennis, for instance. As you will see when Dennis speaks, the most innocuous item has a story to tell. So out of respect for the people who used to work at this mill and those whose work is waiting for us to be discovered, I ask people to refrain from visiting except as part of a guided tour. I'm sorry that I always have to feel like I have to say that, but I don't want people to break their necks either. I'm going to show you just a few photos of the Slarrow Mill. Here it is in all its glory from in the bicentennial book. And here then is the first record of the mill, which starts in 1774 with these deeds. And you can see the deeds here. It's pretty erased. It's probably a screenshot, or I'm not sure whether it's a screenshot or a photograph, but they're recorded in the so-called Book of Leverett, which is in the town vault. And it's the early deeds that Leverett gave up. Yes?
This record, the Book of Leverett, has been scanned as along with a number of other historical books and is available through the Historic Commission website.
Yes. I didn't say that, and I should have. The physical book is in the town vault, but it is available online to look at. And so if you do your best and you download the image and you work on it, you can translate what it says. And one of the things that it says is that a grant of 4 acres of land with the stream has been made by the town to Joseph Slarrow lying around his mill, east, west, and north for the convenience of a mill yard, continuing which point to make up the above complement of 4 acres, taking in the stream, etc. So the point here is that it says around his mill, which suggests that the mill was already there in 1774. When he built it is not clear. So far as I know, he had built it long enough ago to realize he needed a mill yard, I think. And this then here is something that we always do, is we do a summary of what documentation we have of the mill. There is more. This is not a complete summary, but if anybody is interested in this summary, I'm happy to shoot it to them. I just wanted to show you that there's a list, and I'll be working through the list pretty quickly. There's a gap of information, if you see right around in this period, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And we also did not have a chance to look at the tax records as much as we would like to. However, as of the mid-19th century, ownership of the mill has most of the time be in a single family's hands. By that I mean a single family at a time, as opposed to having a conglomerate of 3 or 4 people. And in each instance, it's clear which family that was. Before then, the mill was split up various ways, either through mortgage or through partnerships, and there are some deeds that we have not been able to find. It shows up, this mill, on the 1794 town plan, and this here is the 1794. I expect that most of you in Leverett have seen this before. It's a beautiful, beautiful old document, and it lists, there's a little list here, and it lists all the mills in town and these beautiful hills. And the mill that we are going to be visiting tomorrow and going to be talking about tonight is here with a pond. See that? Under D, listed at D and F, I guess, are sawmills. Slarrow at this point is no longer owning the mill. He owns it until 1779. He then sells part of it, or he mortgages it and goes bankrupt. I don't know which of those two. Like I said, the research, we have not done exhaustive research. In any case, the mill then goes to James Curtis, who owns it at the time this map is made. And Curtis dies at, I think he's 73 or something like that, in 1825. And it causes a little bit of a problem because he either has a partner or a mortgage, but in any case, In 1830, when we have the next piece of the record, it is still one of the few mills. And here is the 1830 Darling town plan. In 1830, the state of Massachusetts had maps done of, had actually told all towns that they needed to do a map. And in particular, they were very interested in how much of the state was still forested. You see here, all these trees here tell us how much of Leverett at this time was still forested. And so we have these and I guess a lot of the towns turn to E.S. Darling, although not all. And so we have a lot of these beautiful, gorgeous maps, and they do also list the mills. And so here it is still one of the few mills. Here's a mill, here's a few mills. And there's in fact already here a side shop, or in any case, a metalworking shop across the river. And I'm not sure why the icon here is different, but I do think that this means that the shop was water powered, as opposed to being a simple blacksmith shop with a forge. At this point, when Curtis dies, the mill ends up being bought in two parts by Horatio Watson. And Horatio Watson is a farmer. And you'll see here in 1858, that's interesting. I turned these two around and they turned themselves back. Oh, well. In 1858, there is another map of Leverett done, and it has an inset. And here you see again the mill. What's remarkable here is that you can really see that the bridge is still below the mill on the river. Later, it is moved to about its current position off over the pond, but at this point, it's still below the mill. And interestingly here, although other mill ponds are shown, notably this here is Chestnut Hill Mill, which we will get back to in a little while. There's no mill pond shown here. And also the mill is just called Sawmill, whereas, for instance, this small mill on Chestnut Hill that we visited last time has an extensive listing of who owns it, as does this mill by Graves. So I'm thinking that Horatio Watson was really a farmer, and he, in 1850 on the census, called himself a farmer, and he also did not get on the census on what's called the manufacturing schedules. That is the listing of who was selling goods. So I'm thinking that Horatio was using this mill for his own purposes, as opposed to really doing a lot of commercial use of the film, of the mill, which might be why is he even running a pond, or is he just sticking a wheel in the water? Who knows what's happening here? And here is that this is the 1870 census, I guess. In 1868, it's clear that Gilman Watson, who is Horatio's son, is getting serious about running this mill. It's still owned by Horatio, but Gilman replaces the up and down saw with a circular saw. And in 1870, here we have a census record. This is called the manufacturing schedule. And the mill appears as a factory. I need to move some more stuff around so that I can see my screen. And if you see here, let's see, here is Gilman Watson on the manufacturing schedule, and it says it's a sawmill worth $2,500. Here is SS Graves and the other SS Graves, the two shops down the river. So you can see here, and the value of the mill here is pretty high, really, that he's putting in. And let's see, he has 4 machines, so 4 saws. It's run by water. He says he has 15 horsepower, which is more than the other 2 people have. And but he's only running 5 months of the year. And he's producing about 60,000 feet. And I think that's, I don't know whether that's linear or board feet, but in any case, that's 60, he's probably board feet of lumber, linear feet of lumber. I'm not sure what this means. I can't really interpret it. So he's really getting serious about this. But if you look at the other two, and I did some of the numbers, is that his income was $380, whereas the other two had more than $1,000 of income out of their mills. So he's not a big guy, but by the same token, he is up and coming. And in 1871, when there's another map done of Leverett, here shows the mill as owned by Gilman Watson. Actually, at this moment, his father actually still owns it, but he's clearly running it. So he has sort of put the mill back on the map by changing the saw and really working it. And in that same year, he actually extended the mill some 15 feet, most of it on one side and some of it on the other end. So he really was investing in it. And in this photo, which is from around 1880, and is the first one I have, the mill has already been enlarged. You can see here these two windows here. This is the extension of the mill here, at least on the west side. And you can see here the extensive lumber yard, the amount of lumber he has here. You can see the pond. And here is Chestnut Hill. And a lot actually happens. When you visit the mill, you can really clearly see all the extensions that he has created in the stonework and in the carpentry. And I'll show you some pictures of some of it today also. And he could saw longer logs. And what happened?
And not to interrupt, but you can also see pretty clearly where that gate that's been covered over with the tarp now is on the blacksmith side, on the opposite side of the river.
That's right.
Right down there, that's where that gate area is that we questioned.
Yes, that's right. You can also really see these. The other thing you can see is Chestnut Hill here. And there was a small mill up here, the one that was really listed in the earlier map. And in 1875, Frank Pike sells the land on which that mill on Chestnut Brook is sitting, as well as the privilege to raise the dam 2 feet and flood more land, to Gilman Watson for $25. And this does not include the shop. He actually keeps his shop. I don't know why, but what this does is it gives Watson a second pond, so more water and more control over his water. And so he's clearly really trying to, make this mill into something that can really work. And that really pays off, because in 1880, he shows up again on the manufacturing schedules. And here he is, Gilman Watson. The mill, interestingly, is now worth less, but of course, who knows how that goes with the value of $1. And he's got 2 hands as opposed to just himself, which is still not that much. They're working 10 hours in the summer and 8 hours in the winter, 12 months a year. And he's running, I think, 3 saws. And here's been a correction, but I think it says number of circular saws. I think what this means is that he has got the 1 big saw, and then he's got 3 attendant sawing machines of some kind. And a couple of those machines are still there, or some of them are still there. And
again, not to interrupt, but that that planer that we saw when we were there.
That's right. There's a planer there, and there's also a machine with which you can rip, right?
Yep.
And that does have a circular blade, but maybe they didn't call it the circular saw, right? And apparently there also is more machinery upstairs that used to be downstairs in the mill. And there's also a place where that was run before that you can still see. So his costs are $1,600 in logs and supply, and he saws 300,000 feet of lumber, which is 5 times as much as he previously did by himself in 5 months. He's not the largest mill in town. That's Ira Watson at Moore's Corner. I don't know if he's related or not. Eva would know that. His profit, however, is $1,400 for the year. I think that he really put the Slarrow Mill on the map. But the kicker here is that, I've got the 1880 census here, right? The kicker here is that, and this is really hard to see, I just need to, hang on one second, I need to move. I have all these pop-ups, you know, with your faces on it and stuff, and they keep popping up. And the kicker here is what it says he has here. And they ask at the end here, what kind of wheel you have. And what he has here is a turbine. And he doesn't just have a turbine, but he has 2. He has 10 feet of head, that is the dam is 10 feet of water level difference. He has 2 turbines, which are, I guess, 4 feet wide. I don't know what that means. And he says they go 500 RPM, and he has 50 horsepower. So his mill has now more than 3 times as much power as it did before, through the combination of getting Chestnut Brook and getting turbines, and of course also having 2, right? So he did a good job, that guy. The Slarrow Mill is on the map. So he works it for a long time. In 1900, he's still working it. You can see here, it looks like there are more trees, but it's a different time of year. You can see here how much he has lying around. And then I'm going to go a little bit faster now. And then after, in 1919, the mill goes into its next phase under the glaciers and becomes a mill that we sort of remember, that is known to have sawn keels for the Navy, for instance, during World War II, being one of the few mills that could saw a timber that long. By the 1970s, sawing lumber with a water mill had become a much rarer event. But the Curleys restored the mill and installed, I guess, a new turbine. I don't have the exact information on that. I do think that that is the same turbine that is in the mill today. And I think it came from Holyoke. I know that others on this program know much more about this than I do. And I would love it if they would elucidate a little bit about, later on, if they would elucidate about putting in that turbine. Right. Yeah.
Just as a FYI, Horatio and Ira were brothers.
Oh, okay. So they were in competition with each other, weren't they? I think, maybe. In any case, the last great event in the life of this mill before this year happened in 1996, when the Sawmill River flooded disastrously. If I'm not mistaken, you can already see the weakness in the middle of the mill, and I could be wrong here, right? Right behind the tree, although the roof is still straight. So you'd see the roof is still straight, but it looks to me like here there's already some stuff happening. I don't know when in 1996 this was. It could have been May or July. It looks like July to me, but I don't know. And then, of course, that winter, the old center of the mill collapsed under the weight of the snow. And
June 7th.
Sorry?
June 7th.
June 7th, yeah. Oh, so it was neither May nor July. So I guess that winter it got hurt, because that winter the center of the mill collapsed under the weight of the snow. And you can see here that it's the old part of the mill that has collapsed, right? The newer part of the mill is still standing. And if this wall was also newer, that is also still standing a little bit. This chimney is no longer there now. It was rebuilt with funds from the Leverett Community Preservation Fund, and now the exterior of the mill has a preservation restriction on it. You can't change it. And by the way, just in this photograph here, you can see the stonework, the separation in the stonework that shows that this part of it is an addition. All right, we're gonna move our way towards a video, some more pretty pictures of what the mill was just before the pond gave up. More recently, last winter, the dam system failed to the extent that the pond had to be drained. Today, the mill has been offered to the town, which is one reason we're all here. But the other is to simply learn more about Leverett's industrial past and the methods by which power was made from running water, which is what the mill site is all about, project is all about. So I'm going to move us towards seeing, looking at Eva's video of the mill.
Excuse me,
Yes.
the dam did not fail. It was just temporarily shut down as a precautionary measure. It did not fail.
Oh, okay. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, I told you I would get stuff wrong. So Eva Gibovic has made a video of the mill, and we're going to have a look at it now. Is there any other questions before we go into the video? No. Oops, right, that's not it. It's so sensitive. There we go. This is it. So here you can see spring water in the pond.
This is from the torrential rains that we had, I think it was last year or the year before.
Yeah. And now we see how it is today. Here you can see the sluice that has been opened. This underpinning, Dennis told me, is very typical of 1880s construction. Here you can see, I'm going to pause the video for a second. Here you can see the opening in the wall. Dennis, do you want to have anything you want to say about this?
Well, it's something that there's been some questions about. My interpretation is that as a relief gate, especially in the springtime, you want to divert the water that is not being used by the mill away from the mill, because obviously it sits in the riverbed, in the stream bed, and you don't want damage going on. But possibility was also raised by another individual that it could have been the beginning of a sluiceway for other water power. So I guess there, still a question that needs to be answered.
This is a wooden, you'll see in a minute, this is a wooden cover over this. At this time, it is not able to be opened, but that doesn't say that it wasn't in the past openable and closable, which is what you're saying, I think, Dennis. And I think most mills had that. When I've looked at dams, you always see an opening like this in them. And it's not the opening to which the water comes that is being used, because that is taken from the bottom in most cases, right, Dennis?
Exactly, yes.
So this is the condition now of the dam today. Partially silted in pond, and here is a relief gate. And if you look here, I don't know if the transition was fairly fast, but here you can see the relief gate on the left here. And this relief gate was undoubtedly put in when the other one was closed off, and or perhaps it was the old access where the old wheel was, who knows, because it's been changed, but I think that will become clear over time. But this here is the entrance to where the turbine is. And as you can see right now, this is silted in. This is a gate that was created probably to keep large pieces and perhaps even fish out of the turbine.
Yeah, it's what they call a trash gates, because the vanes on the turbine are enclosed in a casing, and you don't want any obstructions in there.
That's right. And so here you can see this here, and this we will see in a little while. We will see more clearly. This is the control mechanism for opening and closing the gate here, and it is gone.
Yeah, regarding that gate, the sluice gate that you're just referring to,
The opening gate.
the opening, the sluice gate, can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Yes.
hear you now.
Dick Williams has the mechanism, the original mechanism that belongs to the mill. He would gladly return it to whoever is involved in the restoration.
All right, that's great.
Also, do you know when additional concrete was added to the top of the dam?
Yeah, I think that seems clear, especially when you look on the other side of the dam, that the dam was made about 1.5 feet taller.
Do you know when that happened?
When that happened? No, I'm not totally sure. Do you?
I don't, that's what my question is.
I think the Curlys did it.
Perhaps Sarah thinks perhaps the Curlys had done it. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it might have been earlier in order to increase the water flow.
It would increase the head at the dam.
Yeah, to increase the head, the pressure. So now we're going to the inside of that corner, where right above that arch. And here you can see the mechanism, part of the mechanism that worked to open and close. And you can see it running here. And that is controlled from inside the mill gate. This is the area where the turbine lives, which we'll look at later. And now we've just gone to the main floor of the, sorry about that. It does that, I'm sorry. This is the annoying thing about this program. I need to get back to where we were. Okay, so we're now on the main floor of the mill, and we're going to look at the carriage. And this here, you see the rollers. And this is the work floor. And here you can now see this is the carriage on which the logs sit. And here is the saw. And the carriage would start on this end and go that way to be sawn. Oh, I am so sorry. If I only by the merest of millimeters missed that clicks ahead. And so here we can see the control mechanism. This is the open and close. I think this might be the open and close the gate. And there's another control here. And here is the belt that goes down into the belly of the mill. Wait, it almost looks like it's running there for a second. You can even hear the water and the big saw. So what happens is when you turn on the water to the mill, the carriage starts moving, the saw starts moving. You can turn them on, and slowly the carriage will move past the saw until it's made it pass, and then it will go back. It can be made to turn back. This here is a thing that for calculating board feet and sawing, and this we think might be about the length of the boards, but not totally sure.
Another curious thing that if you're on the tour tomorrow, right next to those controls is also a blower for the to take care of the sawdust.
So smart. But that's run, is that run by electricity or is it run by water?
No, it's run by those belts in that box that you showed just a minute ago.
So here, this part of the dam was raised, but this here is just as high as the raised dam. So I'm not sure that the dam wasn't always that high, but maybe the concrete is a new version of the high. Okay, so that was Ava's video, and I have a short piece of video of my own. I'm not a videographer, but just to show you the area where the turbine lives. And so here we are seeing the water running out to the gates. There's the dam. Here you can see how it was made taller with concrete. But you see it's the same height as this stuff here, as the stone. Now here we have that control mechanism again, and there's a box here. And it's the box in which sits the main working part of the turbine. And then it becomes a little murky, but you can see the turbine housing down here and the axle. And the turbine runs these various belts, which is something I'm going to skip for a moment. Just wanted to show you the turbine. Here's a turbine in the housing. I have a composite photo. Where did it go? Here it is. A composite photo of the turbine, the part of the turbine that turns the axle. You can see the axle here, and I'm sorry it's also murky, but it's very dark down there. Here's the composite. That's much clearer. So here, this part of the turbine, the part of the turbine that turns the axle is actually somewhere in there, right? And this is the outflow of the turbine. Okay, let me just go back. Sorry, this is a part of I wanted to show you also this factory, the whole machinery runs on belts and axles. So I've taken a little longer than I otherwise would have, so I'm going to skip the detailed explanation of that. But you can see this here turns an axle, which in turn there is a belt, turns this wheel, which runs a belt. And the whole mill is run from belt to axle to belt to axle. And so you can see here, downstairs that there are other axles, other belts that come off, connecting axles, and then the power gets turned. And then this here you can see is the lever to turn it to, I think this might be the one for the water, or maybe this is the gate for the water, and then this is the one that actually sets the saw going.
I think that moves the drive belt on and off. Goes
That's
from
right.
an idle to a drive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then this is probably one that does the gate, because it is turned. And whenever last work was being done on it, they were in the process of replacing the wheel that was on here to open and close the gate.
Yeah, they had obviously broken the old wheel
Right.
off.
And the new one is sitting there and waiting to be installed. Fortunately chained. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about this turbine. I think this is a Hercules turbine out of Holyoke, but Richard, I think you know more about it than I do.
The Rodney Hunt turbine.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
Rodney Hunt. Okay.
Yeah, and it is out of a fairly large mill in Holyoke. It's actually probably too big for this dam. It's a very big turbine.
Mhm.
And it's a fairly substantial system. The
Right.
drive shafts, by the way, are called line shafts.
That's right.
And,
So because I took so long, I wanted to skip forward and get Dennis a chance to say his thing. So I want to show you here some of the other machinery. Here is Dennis looking at the old an old up and down saw. And Dennis, I'm going to stop my show.
So I wanted to just take a few minutes to put the mill in Leverett in context for today. And I appreciate being asked to be here tonight. And as was mentioned, I did start my public history career at Old Sturbridge Village in 1978 and worked 40 years in the living history field, doing lots of things. And one of the projects that I did get to work on as part of the construction crew was actually the construction of the sawmill here at Old Sturbridge Village back in 1983, 1984. We did it over several months when it was a slower visitation time so that we wouldn't be interrupting the flow of visitors in the busier time of year. Back then when we used to have a lot more traffic, unfortunately, than what they do today. And this mill was based on a mill in Bow, New Hampshire that was destroyed in the flood of 1938. But luckily, it had been recorded under the HABS program, the Historic American Building Survey, one of those alphabet programs under the FDR administration during the Depression. So using those drawings, technical drawings, and the descriptions, we set out to actually hand hew and do mortise and tenon construction on the mill. Unlike many of the other mills, this one does sit partially in the water, like the one that you have there in Leverett, but instead of discharging the finished lumber on the same side that the logs come in, the one at Old Sturbridge Village discharges the lumber across the water onto the land next to the tail race. So it's in one side and out the other instead of everything being done on one side. But otherwise, the basic construction you can see here is very, very similar. And sawmills were pretty regular. They were some of the earliest mills that you see existing in communities. The sawmill itself, the concept of it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's something that people were very, very familiar with when the Euro-Americans came and settled in the New World. And it tends to be one of the first mills in an area and tends to be not unique. There generally are many mills in one community because they are relatively speaking low tech when it comes to mills. Most sawmills, as you saw, in the presentation that was done a minute ago did not operate year round. They operated in the late winter and early spring because that's when the highest water the volume of water was most available at that time through melt and through spring rains. And most sawmills ran on flutter wheels. They ran on fairly large undershot wheels, which required a good flow of water, but didn't necessarily require a high head. You don't need a lot of torque to run them. And in the sawmill at Old Sturbridge Village, just as in all sawmills up through the 1850s to the American Civil War period, it ran with a saw frame with a straight bladed saw that ran up and down in that frame and gave you what's referred to as a reciprocating saw. So I'm quite familiar of the Old Sturbridge Village mill and then operating the mill after we put it together. This is another mill that has a very, very similar story to yours. It's slightly later. It dates from about 1800 and was originally again, a reciprocating sawmill. Here you see that the roof is turned 90 degrees on what it is on yours. And what you can see in the picture with the new colored lumber, those are the open bays. That's where the lumber comes in on the left-hand bay, and the wood goes in on the left-hand bay and the finished lumber comes out on the right-hand bay. This started out as a reciprocating sawmill as well. It sits down in the river here in Woodstock, half into it on the bank. And about the time of the American Civil War or just after, the Chamberlain family added the circular saw. Again, very, very similar to what was going on in Leverett. Well, this was on land that was donated to the Land Trust and the Conservation Commission, not the Historical Commission, but the Conservation Commission in Woodstock. And originally this was going to be hiking trails, and the dam was going to, and its impounded water was going to be used for recreation. But they thought that this was such a resource that over the past 10 years or so, there's been a friends group that has been formed, and they're working on the restoration of the mill. It had damage during a flood in the early 20th century, and they changed from the original water wheel to a turbine, much like what went on in Leverett. And then after that flooding, when the turbine was damaged, they changed to Studebaker power. They actually had an old Studebaker automobile that was set up on the outside, and they ran the belts off the rear axle of the Studebaker, and they still have that automobile there today. And one of the local automobile clubs has actually restored the drivetrain and so forth, so they can still run their operation on that gas-powered drive system. The other mill that I visited and I'm quite familiar with, a friend of mine that works for the state of New Hampshire as a ranger runs this mill, and this is the Taylor Sawmill in Derry, New Hampshire, and it is in a state forest, and it's open episodically. I guess that's the best way to put it. But here, very different than in most other sawmills. You can see that whole bottom area has been sheathed over, and you have an overshot wheel. Instead of a flutter wheel or a undershot wheel or even a breast wheel, here we have an overshot wheel. So you get some high torque, and you can also get the RPM on the saw frame. And you see the saw frame on the right here. They still do demonstrations in the mill to produce some lumber that's used by the state, but mainly to explain to visitors the amount of labor, the amount of heavy work that went into running this kind of operation. So if, and on a tour tomorrow, or if you look around, if you own an old house, you can tell what type of tool was used to make that lumber. And on the left, we have some sheathing from the exterior of a house. And on the right, we have some flooring, the underside of some flooring. All of these pieces of wood with tool marks are all from my house. I put this together real quick this afternoon, and I got to use my house as examples of what you'd see. So these are reciprocating saw marks, and this is all going to be something that dates from they use 1850, but it's between 1850 and 1860, depending how conservative your particular community is, that the change takes place between the reciprocating saw and the circular saw. So here we have some reciprocating saw marks, and you hear quite a bit about how big the boards are. This is a piece of sheathing that came off of my house, and this is 17.5 inches long, and they, wide, and the boards will get wider than that. That's one advantage to the reciprocating saw over the early circular saws. The metallurgy in the early circular saws with the RPMs that they were putting out didn't allow you to have very large diameter saws. So it really decreased the size boards that you could produce. Whereas with a reciprocating saw, you can make a 2 foot, 27, 28 inch wide board without any trouble at all. And in both cases here, this is pine, which again, when you looked at the manufacturing reports that we saw earlier, you saw that pine was one of the main woods, along with chestnut, which we're never going to see again. But pine and chestnut were very common woods in the forests of our area, chestnut being the main one. And here are examples, again, from Old Sturbridge Village that show that reciprocating system. So as was mentioned, the water wheel would be open. That starts the gearing turning. You then slide your drive from an idle to an active size, and that will start the saw working up and down in the frame. And then you can engage the carriage so that the carriage would move. So the movement of the carriage and the movement of the blade are run by the same water source, but they're independent of each other. So you don't jam the wood too quickly into the blade or bog the blade down for the amount that it can cut at a time. So it slides up and down in grooves and slots inside of that frame to produce those characteristic marks. And here, as was already pointed out, is a reciprocating saw blade from a sawmill. And what I'm pointing to is how thick the blade was, where the teeth used to start when that blade was new. And it was sharpened back and sharpened back and sharpened back till it's as thin as what you see now. So that's many, many, many years and many thousands and thousands of board feet of lumber that particular blade produced. The alternative to sawing, and sawmills could only produce lumber to a certain length. The earliest colonial sawmills could only produce boards up to 18 to 19 feet long. And then you find some in the early 19th century going to the 25, 26 foot. And then you find in the early 20th century that they're being expanded so they can cut even longer. But even if you're looking at a building that is around, that dates from the time period that sawmills were available, if you have anything that's over, again, depending on the time, 20, 25, or 30 feet, it still had to be hand hewn. So here we have examples of the hand hewn framing. These are the axe marks, the score marks that divide the grain up into sections. And then those sections would be removed by the use of a broadex. And again, this is framing in my house that I'm showing here. And here are the example of broad axes. There's a Pennsylvania and a New England style broad axe. These are actually the axes that I use in hewing the framing for that sawmill at Old Sturbridge Village. So these are both antique examples of tools, and they work in many ways. If people do woodworking, it's like a plane without a body around it. So you're actually making the blade go across the grain and shear away the wood in between those score marks that we saw left on the beam. Something else we hear a lot about, and people misinterpret those score marks as being adze marks, but this is a carpenter's adze, and carpenter's adze are used to finish the surface of the beam so you don't see any marks. This will smooth the beam or the post out so that there are no marks except a gentle waving mark because of the curve that you swing this with. It's also used for making rafter ends and for fitting joists. If you have joists of different thicknesses and you need to have a level floor, you use an adze for leveling off all your pieces before you lay your floor down. So they
Dennis?
come out even. Yes.
So I just wanted to say that when we were there together, we could tell the difference in age between the framing on the downstairs, which is 18th century and has the marks that we are talking about, right?
Right. And that's why I want to show these tonight, so that, you know, some people may not be there tomorrow, they won't be able to see, but if you do come, this is kind of a teaser for what you might see.
That's right.
Okay, so those are the adze marks. And then we have, as I said, between 1850 and the 1860s, the introduction of the circular saw, again, like you have on the mill there today, originally with relatively small diameter circular saws. And we saw a broken one of those in the mill office when we were there. Maybe we'll haul that out tomorrow so people can see what the earlier ones were like. And then eventually they get larger and larger diameter, and many of them have teeth that can be removed. So if one tooth is damaged or bent or whatever, you don't have to take the whole blade away and file the entire blade. So there are many changes in technology that take place. Now, we talk about circular saws developing during those particular decades in the mid-19th century, but circular saws are something that show up in the German states in the 1500s. So it's not a new idea, but it's not an idea that becomes common, especially in Old England and New England until the 19th century. But the idea was around. And here we have examples of the marks that a circular saw makes. And you can see the gentle curves in this. And if you take a protractor and lay it down on there and swing the arm out, you can figure out what diameter saw was used to cut the wood. So you can figure that out by the curvature of the telltale pieces of wood. Again, examples from the newest edition on my house, on an L on my house. So that's, again, just kind of a brief teaser of some of the things that we're going to see tomorrow. And hopefully this will entice people to want to know more about the mill, but also want to care about the mill, that it's an unusual example of something that is still around from a time period where it shouldn't be around. There were hundreds of thousands of these things, and there's really just a handful left. So it's an amazing survivor. It's one that's not stuck in time. It's one that's evolved through time, and that's something that makes it even more special. So thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm wondering if there are any questions for Dennis or for me, or anybody who wants to add what they know about the mill to our conversation. And I thought Ann Ferguson was trying to, but she was giving us applause. Well, thank you. I'm sure that there are
Actually,
people
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because Richard said at one point when we were talking about the turbine made in Holyoke that it was too big for this dam, and I wondered if he would just elaborate a little on that. Richard Nathorst?
Yep, I'm I think that mill, that turbine came out of a mill in Holyoke, and I think the Curleys secured that and brought it up, and I think they got what they could get. And that's about a 4-foot diameter turbine. It's pretty large for a dam, as small as the dam on Sawmill River.
You're really dropping away. I wonder if you should try to be closer to your mic or something.
Or turn up your microphone.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that makes it easier. Yeah.
Okay, I'm closer to it.
So you're saying you need a certain amount of water to go through a turbine, and because that thing is 4 feet in diameter. So the way a turbine works, it's like a closed wheel. It's like a wheel in a tub.
That's correct.
So the first mills had over or undershot or breastshot water, that is, it's open, there's a big wheel and the water hits it in some place and then the water goes just anywhere. And what a turbine tries to do is really control that flow of water so that the maximum force comes onto the fins that are in the turbine by enclosing everything and really directing the water. But you still need a certain amount of water, even though you don't need as much water with a turbine. If you have one that's as large as 4 feet in diameter, you're going to be using a lot of water it makes a lot of power, but you need a lot of water, and you don't need that much power to saw wood, I think is the point. That's the point that Dennis made, isn't it?
Right. And the other thing we were talking about when we were there on site looking at it is you need to, again, having it enclosed, as you just said, as opposed to being open. One of the biggest problems is getting rid of the water once it's been used. So the tail race, or, you know, if it silts up underneath, or you have freezing that happens under there, the water has got to get out of that casing to make it run efficiently.
Right, and in this case, both the intake and the exit are fully silted up. So this turbine is completely wound up and silt plugged at this point.
Unfortunately, you're still popping in and out, your voice, that is. But you're saying, so I'm going to repeat what I think you said. You said that both the intake and the outflow are fully silted up in this case. I'm wondering if there's any record or if anybody knows when the Curleys were restoring the mill and put in this turbine, what had been there. Because I'm wondering if what had been there was not the 2 turbines that that Watson put in the 1880s. But I don't know if anybody knows that.
I think Keith Curley is on here.
Yeah.
I am on, but I don't know. I was actually just thinking that my mother might know. She would probably be the one to ask if anyone knew at this point. And I was just thinking I was about to call her and ask her that question.
Well, maybe there's a photo album or something. That would be really great to have.
Sure, I can check with her.
And maybe there's a bill from the haulers and riggers that brought it there from Holyoke. That couldn't have been a cheap deal to do.
Yeah,
hi, everybody. This is Lance Curley. And I am aware that my father, Lloyd Curley, and his brother, Hugh Curley, rebuilt the turbine in the early 80s. I was never made aware of them actually installing that turbine. To my knowledge, it was in place when they bought the mill in 1970 or 69. I'm not sure if that ages according to that particular turbine from Holyoke, but to my knowledge, there was concrete work around it that was done. I actually helped repair the sluiceway and the foundation wall just outside of the sluiceway that leads into the turbine. Those slats were constantly breaking with downstream trees kind of running into it during storms. So it was a common occurrence. The mill pond, because of the 4-foot diameter of that turbine, there was about 6.5 hours of sawing based on water power. After that, and that was when the mill pond was fully cleaned out, meaning it was holding the largest volume of water. I was told at one point it was like almost 2 acres of water in the full mill pond backing up the river in terms of volume. And that ran the sawmill for about 6+ hours, after which they switched over to the diesel cat, which is now outside in the front driveway in probably a seized up condition. It was inside for years, but the opportunity to saw was about 6 hours on that particular run. And I believe that turbine was always what the family used. But it did have to be rebuilt in the early 80s, which was roughly 10 or 12 years after they bought it, because the fins were shot. I think they replaced them with Teflon, and maybe they were metal of some sort before that.
Wow, thank you. That's really interesting. That 6.5 hours shows the point that Richard made, right? Which is that the turbine is too big for the flow that's possible with that pond.
Yeah.
And of course, with the Chestnut Hill mill dam gone, there's no second, you don't have a second pond to fill the first pond up with, either.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, this is Keith Curley talking in. I actually just called my mother, and she confirmed that the turbine was there when my father and Hugh bought it, but it was running. It was run with a gas powered. I'm blanking what it's called. It was run by gas at the time, and they repaired it so it could run with water again. Essentially,
Oh, okay.
that's what she said.
So that diesel is sort of like the Studebaker of this mill, as it were.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you really need to aggressively seek out people in Leverett who have actually worked at the mill. And I'm thinking, Edie, you may correct me on this, but Barry Black, I understood, had actually operated at the mill at some point, along with his dad, Jim Black. Harold Black.
Yeah,
And
the
Harold
Blacks assisted, and I know that Matthew Howard also spent some time
Right.
behind the carriage assisting.
Right.
I was there in my younger days from 5 to 10, so I've seen it run, and I know what the working parts kind of do in general, but it was mostly dismantled and inoperable when I was kind of in adulthood, so I don't recall specifically, but I think probably if any of the Blacks are around, Barry Black would probably be the best bet. He used to run a sawmill up on Hemingway, which is now closed, I believe, or maybe it was sold to someone.
It's still in operation.
Is it?
Yes. But the other thing is Dick Williams is another resource. As I mentioned, he has some of the components of the mill that he'd gladly give back to whoever is going to proceed with the restoration. So I think there's folks like, and even, another connection, I think, as he knows, Bob Jablonski's father, Bernie, actually passed away at the mill. I think he was underneath at the time working on a diesel engine. And that would have been in what, Edie, probably the late 70s, maybe when Bernie Jablonski was working there. So again, there's a lot of history of folks in the town that have some sort of association with that mill that unfortunately are not on this Zoom. And I'm kind of disappointed I don't see any of the select board on the Zoom either. But also, Lance, I think you know our son Paul Robinson.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, very good. So
yeah, he was one year ahead of me in school.
Okay.
I haven't seen him in ages, but I hope he's well. And one other thing I wanted to mention, during the tour tomorrow, the upstairs main floor kind of corner tool room is open, and there's an up and down saw blade in that tool room leaning up against the wall, which I was told is from that mill that was there before they switched to the circular saw. So I think that's from the actual site, not just a remnant of some mill that ended up there. So.
Well, there are a lot of parts and pieces that are lying around that appear to be from the mill. There are in the tool room. There are. Remind me again, Dennis, what these things are called. The grease.
Yeah, the bearing housings that have the grease fittings, the grease wells in them, the lower and upper section. There's also tools for splicing, belting, and so forth in there. There's a lot of little minutia that goes along with the trade that's just laying around in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of really wonderful stuff. Those bearings you told me used to be greased with lard.
With lard, yeah, originally, yeah.
Before whale grease became available. There's a lot of stuff that goes around with a mill, but what's so beautiful here is that there's 18th century pieces, 19th century pieces, 20th century pieces, various methods of making power. Is there anybody else who would like to share or ask questions?
I'm wondering, again, Don Robinson, I'm wondering, Lance or your brother, whether there should be an effort to secure some of this stuff that's laying around. It can tend to walk away. We've had that situation even on a gate on the cemetery in Jackson Hill Road, where the parts of the gate have disappeared. And there's obviously indications that teenagers are in the building. So, you know, this stuff is irreplaceable. So shouldn't there be an effort to secure that?
Well, it probably should be documented before being secured, if nothing else.
Well, you can document it after it's secured, but if it walks away, you won't be able to document it.
It's true too.
Yeah, there's a bunch of material that was actually stored on site. Most of what was in the mill itself is still within it. You know, the concern for the artifacts that are out in the driveway under a failing tarp at this point, for being put in the building, was that, you know, it's an excessive amount of weight, and we were concerned about, you know, loading the floor up. It's quite a large amount of equipment, and you know, because of the historic preservation restriction on the building, it effectively disallows us from actually closing and securing the main floor. And that's been, you know, a bit of a challenge to kind of protect the building and its contents, with the exception of that locked room at the back rear corner over the water. So, you know, our intention is to keep all of that material with the mill. And obviously, you know, it's not in a great safe location, I would say, but I kind of keep a watchful eye on it by kind of passing through from time to time, and I do get kind of feedback from neighbors in the area who you know, are helpful in kind of keeping an eye on who's around. We've got the building posted, but beyond that, it's you know, it's one of the reasons why, as a family, we had hoped that this kind of donation and acceptance would happen in a timely manner, so that you know, whoever was going to take responsibility for it from this point forward can start to make reparations for kind of securing some of that stuff. So if there's interest in doing that, we can certainly organize a group and try to find a logical place to kind of tuck that away somewhere. We just wanted to kind of keep it all on site if possible. So.
Thank you, Lance.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming to the end of today's program, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about tomorrow. We're going to meet at, those of you who want to come, We're going to meet at 2 o'clock. You can park at the Baptist, behind the Baptist church across the street. Please cross carefully. Most of it has been mowed. And we're going to do a program first upstairs, and then small groups will go downstairs with Dennis to look at the turbine and housing, because it's small downstairs and there's a lot of stuff lying around and a little bit dangerous. So we're going to take a great deal of care to try and not hurt anybody. And we're hoping that you'll come. The weather is supposed to be beautiful. And we're going to talk about the machinery that's there, about the layering, about the and look at some of the stuff that we found in the workroom also. Are there any questions about tomorrow? In that case, I want to thank particularly Dennis Picard. Thank you, Dennis, and I'm really looking forward to going through the mill. It was an eye-opener for me to do my trip to the mill with you, so I can definitely recommend it. Everything we see, tells a piece of the story, down to the 18th century nails or spikes that are in some places that tell us about, and the marks that tell us when the beams were hewn. And I want to thank the CPC for funding this project. And I want to thank the Curley family for making all of this possible. And Eva, for your work on this program. It is over and above the call of duty and wonderful. And then I want to thank the Leverett Historical Commission. And I'm hoping to see most of you tomorrow.
And we want to thank you for all of the work that you do to put these programs together for us.
It's so much fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.